The first question is for Joe. And the call is coming from inside the house. It's coming from Nicola. And he asks, how far are we to having a strong, secure, and efficient isogeny-based VDF, hence a post-quantum VDF?
I think some of that question maybe was assumed by Justin's talk. But yeah, I think that there was a paper in 2018 about VDFs from isogenies that sort of had hope that they would be quantum resistant. But yeah, it turns out, I think it turns out that original scheme is not going to work out. So, I mean, as far as I know, I'm not sure we're really any closer to having an isogeny-based post-quantum VDF. I think, as Justin said, most of the thought on post-quantum VDFs, so far has been ones using, using generic proof techniques, using some sort of post-quantum SNARK system. But who knows? Something from lattices or elsewhere could come up and give us, another family of post-quantum VDFs.
Maybe I'll follow on. Justin, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, to elaborate a little bit?
Nope, I agree 100% with what Joe said.
Great, yeah, I think you covered a lot of that in your talk. I think I will go next for a question for Kelly, also from the chat. How do you determine the attacker speedup for AMAX? Isn't it always dependent on economic assumptions? Like Justin suggested, and even in the absence of new developments, a sufficiently motivated attacker could always re-implement the VDF on a higher frequency circuit, even if that means going cryogenic GAN, GAS, SIGE.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, I guess there's two ways to look at the theoretical sort of fastest attacker speed, and certainly economics is one way, and to think about, if an attacker has $50 million or $100 million, what sort of technologies are available to them to implement a fast VDF. The other is more from a theoretical perspective, which I think I would hand off to Justin, because he's been doing quite a bit of this this research with complexity theorists. And so maybe Justin, you can talk a little bit more from the more theoretical standpoint.
Yeah, so one of the things you can do, for example, is look at fundamental physical constants like proof of light, speed of light, or you could look at fundamental information theoretic results about computation. So if you, one example of the latter is if you assume that for example, a repeated squaring VDF can only be done using repeated squaring, well, you basically reduce the problem to understanding how fast can you do squaring. And it turns out that you can analyze the problem information theoretically and look at the circuit depth of a network of transistors that would implement squaring. And so the circuit depth is basically the minimum number of transistors, of sequential transistors that need to go through. And the result that we have right now is that if you want to do an n-bit modular multiplication, you roughly have to pay log n transistors. Actually, there's a constant there, which is like 2 or 3 or 4, I forget exactly. So if you're doing 2,000 bit modular squaring, log of 2000 is 11, and then you're going to have a small factor there, like let's say 2, and so then you're going to have a minimum of 22 transistors in your circuit depth. And then you can look at the physics of transistors. How fast can transistors go? If they can go at, let's say, 10 picoseconds per transistor, and there's no way to switch transistor any faster than 10 picoseconds, then 22 times 10 picoseconds, which is, I guess, 220 picoseconds, is going to be your theoretical lower bound in terms of how much time it's going to take. It doesn't matter how much cooling you have, or how much overclocking, or how much binning you're doing. You're going to have this hard physical constraint on computation.
Thank you.
I guess I would just add one thing too, which is, well, like you said, a sufficiently motivated attacker, or, I think funded attacker, it is an economic question. And the good news is, as far as we know, I mean, there's no fundamental physical law for this, but you usually get diminishing returns for more money you spent on hardware. If you want to go, twice as fast, it's a lot more than twice as expensive. So, we can deal with this with safety margins, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is kind of just a best guess.
I mean, one of the things that we've seen in terms of sequential computation is it completely plateau. I mean, not completely, but much more so than, let's say, Moore's law, which talks about the density of transistors per unit area, or things like Nielsen's law, which talks about the exponential growth of bandwidth. But sequential computation has plateaued. So if you take a CPU core, it doesn't really, this one CPU core doesn't really go much faster year on year anymore.
Yeah, although it's possible that it's possible VDFs will spur new research from hardware people, and maybe push that plateau a little bit. But yeah, it would be surprising if we had like 100 gigahertz CPUs next year.
Yeah, I think the one other thing maybe to say is also, that's the point of, I guess, the AMAX parameter, is to be able to account for these things and change for them over time. So as we learn about new hardware techniques, maybe new exotic materials, that's a parameter within the protocol that you can always extend to sort of ensure that you have those safety margins, as Joe mentioned.
Great. It'll be cool to see how this virtuous cycle develops in the future. Let me go on to the next question, which is for Justin, and it is, which VDF implementation do you recommend that we use today?
Right, so it turns out there's various VDFs in production or soon to be in production right now. There's Solana, which has the SHA-256 VDF in production in the blockchain today. There's Chia, which is using the class group VDF in a testnet and will be in production very soon. We have the FPGA-based RSA VDF service, which is being run by the VDF Alliance, also live right now. And we also have Vdoo, which is also live on mainnet today. And I guess which VDF to go for, it really depends on what kind of assumptions you want to make, what kind of environments you're running in. Are you doing the verification of the VDF inside the CPU? Are you doing it inside the EVM? Are you doing it inside of a SNARK circuit? All of these things will have a great impact on which VDF you want to choose. So I can't really give an answer. The trade-off space is quite large. I think what will happen is that if one party develops hardware for VDFs and they make the investment of, let's say, $10 million, then that will kind of be a way to standardize by brute force which VDF is the best, because it will clearly be better, at least in the one metric, which is the AMAX, which is one of the very important metrics out there.
Thanks a lot. And I see that Joe is pointing us to the vdfresearch.org.
That was a suggestion. I was saying, as Justin was talking, there's enough services running now that we almost need a VDF implementation listing.
That's a great suggestion.
Okay, so not implemented yet. So future directions.
The one other thing I was going to add to what Justin said about whoever gets hardware first is, there's also there's kind of strength in numbers. Like one implementation will probably be once it's established and it's the most scrutinized, it will have the most confidence, and that will lead more people to look at it. And this sort of happens with crypto in general, that there's safety in using the standard things because we have the most confidence that they've stood up to scrutiny. So hopefully, something will emerge, but there are different use cases. So.
Thank you. I think I'll go on to the next question now, which is for Joe. And it is, You said that it might be worth looking at financial data instead of, or in addition to, blockchain data. Do the benefits of using an external high entropy source outweigh the drawbacks of having to deal with oracles?
Yeah, I think it depends on what your goals are, but from from my experience trying to sell, the concept of VDFs or a verifiable randomness in general to people who come from the traditional lottery world, it's so much easier to explain the stock market entropy source and why it's unpredictable. And at the end of the day, a goal in all of a lot of these applications, at least maybe not in like leader election, a consensus protocol, but if we want to switch the the NBA draft lottery to a verifiable lottery, or the World Cup draw or some high profile thing, you want there to be a story to sell the public, and it's easier to explain why stock prices are random than why blocks in the blockchain are random, and there is some value to that. Yeah, I mean, there's also in some sense like it's hard to evaluate. Is the risk of like a 12-hour reorg on the Ethereum main chain higher than the risk of somebody moving every price on the New York Stock Exchange for the day? I don't think it's a simple question to answer. So it's possible the security is better with large cap stocks, but it certainly adds the hurdle of needing oracles if you want the randomness available on chain. But there are off-chain applications, right? There are lotteries in the real world that never really touch the blockchain, and for those, the fact that you need an oracle is sort of implied already. So,
Thank you. I look forward to FIFA's reaction to a truly random World Cup draw. The next question, it will be given live by Marcel.
The night is always almost over, or the day, the conference, and we learn a lot about VRFs and VDFs and distributed randomness. But for someone who's not very familiar with the concepts, you can kind of maybe confuse it or the benefits. So I just wanted to ask you maybe if somebody could wrap up the differences between VRFs and VDFs, and since some protocols like Dfinity or Polkadot are rather relying on VRFs, why would you rather, like for Ethereum, rely on VDFs? Do you think they're more secure? I mean, there's obviously some hurdles regarding the hardware and all that makes it harder for the users. So why do you think they're the better choice?
I mean, happy to take this one if no one else will. I mean, I guess a VDF is a VRF, just with some sort of extra delay component. Like a VRF is a very simple thing, and you can use it to build things like Randall. I think what you're really asking is, what is the difference in security between the threshold-based schemes and the VDF-based schemes? It's kind of tempting to want to compare VRF and VDF because they share so many letters, but there's really not much magic to a VRF. It's really, I would compare the threshold cryptography versus the time-based cryptography. And the big advantage of the time-based cryptography is that it has this concept of strong liveness. So it will, and strong unpredictability. So even if almost all participants are malicious, you still have liveness. So you still have random numbers coming in, and you still have unpredictability. So it's kind of a honest minority assumption. You just need one person in the world really to be honest, and the thing will run properly. In contrast, the threshold-based schemes, you want an honest majority, not an honest minority, in order for it to function properly. And so it's more brittle, I guess. And one of the things that we want to do at the Ethereum Foundation is we want to never really sacrifice liveness. And the motto that we have is we want Ethereum 2.0 to be World War III resistant.
Mm-hmm.
So even if, you know, some atomic bombs all around the world, you know, explode and 90% of the population is gone and almost all validators are gone, we still want the network to function properly. And that's achievable with VDFs.
Are you sacrificing consistency for that liveness, or no?
No. So it turns out that if you put consistency over liveness, then you're losing in liveness. But if you favor liveness over consistency, then you basically give your users the option to basically operate in this non-safe, potentially non-safe mode for a temporary amount of time, and then go back to operating normally, as opposed to forcing all your users across the board to shut down during this period where you have this doubt about consistency. So in Ethereum, we want to give people, smart contract developers, the choice to run even during periods where there's no finality of the blockchain, and then eventually there'll be finality. This is very different to a system like Dfinity, where if the randomness beacon stalls, the whole blockchain stalls for all users. And then during this period of non-finality, users have no option to even attempt to participate because the blockchain has stalled.
Thank you very much for a great wrap-up question, Marcel.
Thank you.
And I think with that, we will close the final Q&A session. Thanks to all the participants for some really thought-provoking questions. It's been a great day with a lot of food for thought, and I think we've covered a lot of ground on these exciting topics. And I'd also like to thank the last panel for handling the questions really well and for some exciting talks.